Good morning. And he calls me the scariest man in America. That really kills my chance for dates, you know that. I mean, it's like, wow, that's the scariest guy in America. Nobody would go out with that. But actually, I want to clarify that. I'm not the scariest guy in America. I think you are. Do we have something to prove that? Is that not the scariest man in America?
Bojangles, baby, Bojangles.
I'm on a quest. I want to meet the first person who signed up for the Affordable Care Act. Is that person in this room? Has anybody successfully signed up yet? Anyone? And we're expecting this same team to defend America. We've been meeting like this for several years now. I recognize quite a few of you in the audience. We talk about the impending crisis. Thank God it hasn't happened yet. And before coming out here, I was thinking about something I just read several weeks back. It's a relatively unknown story about something that happened on 9/11. Recall that the attack on the World Trade Center was the second attack. It had been hit some years earlier. There was a gentleman working there who took on the responsibility of head of security for a rather large corporation based in that building. He was responsible for the safety of, I think it was 400 or 500 employees, and he took it seriously. Rather than just sit back in his office and get the memos from the people who ran the buildings and everything else, this guy took it seriously. And he completely disagreed with a lot of the procedures that they were being told, which was if something bad happens, just sit back and wait. He attended conferences, training programs. He mapped out his own plan. He was ready on the day it happened. It didn't surprise him at all. In fact, there were written documentation from him projecting, this was several years before 9/11, that when it hits, it will be a plane. And it will be a large commercial aircraft used as a bomb. This gentleman got almost all his employees out. If they had followed the procedure that they were told to follow, they all would have died. He was last seen going up the steps to try and rescue some more when the building collapsed. Ultimately, he was right. It didn't come when he expected it, but he was indeed right. I pray I'm wrong. I pray we're all wrong. But it's far, far better that we be prepared in case whatever happens finally does happen. And that's been a remarkable experience for me since my book came out. It's hard for me to believe it was 4.5 years ago. I want to share with you just briefly a couple of things, and then the format I always like to use is far more question and answer and discussion. And since we are recording this, just stand up, give the question. I'll repeat it so we can all hear it clearly, and then we'll go from there. And I also know that there are some questions that there are experts sitting in this room, for example, that I know that are far more capable than I to discuss some issues, and if they have a better answer than me, I'm going to call them up here. Last month, I went up for a conference, a roundtable discussion with a group, ACD, American Center for Democracy, which has taken on the issue of infrastructure preparedness against cyber attack and the threat of EMP. I was amazed to be sitting next to a former head of the CIA, one of the good guys, who actually said that when he read my book, it slapped him up over the side of the head. But when he and some other experts on the technology that we're facing spoke, I was just sitting there going, God, no. In fact, when the conference was over, we all went out on the patio in a 10th floor building that looked out across towards the Capitol building. This was literally hours before the government shutdown started. And we all sat there pretty darn depressed. One of the people up on Capitol Hill finally going to really wake up to what are the real issues confronting America, rather than diverting us with so much of the foolishness that is going on at this moment. Here's the one that shocked me. When I started researching the book, for the book 10 years ago, as to what happens with an EMP, the detonation of a nuclear device above the Earth's atmosphere, the gamma ray bursts coming off the detonation, hits the upper atmosphere, sets up something called the Compton effect. It's just a chain reaction of free electrons that build up an electrostatic charge that, at the speed of light, cascades down to the Earth's surface and short circuits things out. The laydown that was presented in the congressional report of 2004 estimated about 200 to 1,000 volts per square meter would be the laydown. That is what people who were working to harden systems were thinking about and talking about. EMP is not something that just suddenly hit us in 2004. We had been testing, and the Russians had too, back in the early 60s. If you can look it up, our test was known as Starfish Prime. The Russian test was known as Soviet Test 184. So both we and the Russians were aware of warfighting usage of EMP, that in fact it would be an opening strike to destroy the command and control system of your opponent. 200 to 1,000 volts per square meter. And then one of the gentlemen sitting at the table for this discussion gave us the new updated figures that we're in a declassified setting, and I'm looking straight at the camera. I don't deal with anything classified. Any conference I've ever been at is either declassified or unclassified material. The some still Soviets, the Russians, Chinese, North Korean system, estimates are that they are developing a super gamma ray burst weapon that could lay down upwards of 100,000 volts per square meter. There is no protection of the infrastructure against that. So here we're hardening some systems up to resist 1,000, 2,000 volts per square meter. The second part of it is, it's really scary, is that the weapon needed to do this, some people think of a huge megaton bomb. They're talking 1 to 2 kiloton, meaning about 1/6 the size of the the Hiroshima bomb. Hiroshima bomb was 12 kiloton. We all know what it did. Guess who is testing very low yield nuclear weapons? The North Koreans, in the 1 to 2 K range. Are they testing for a high yield gamma burst? Well, when somebody keeps saying every 2 to 3 months that they're going to bathe us in nuclear fire and death, I do tend to start taking them seriously. So this was the very distressing news coming out of this, that we could be facing up to 100,000 volt per square meter laydown, very low ohm level, but still enough to totally destroy the system. So on that happy note, I'm going to go get some scotch, put it in my drink, call it a night, go home, write another book. I just want to lay that out, though, that these things are developing. So what's the response? And this is what we as citizens have to keep pushing for. The state of Maine actually did pass an infrastructure security bill about 4 to 6 months ago. Maine was the first. I'm proud to say that the state legislator who authored the bill, she had actually read my book and some other books, and that motivated her to go forward. North Carolina, the state legislators, there's a number of them. In fact, I'll be meeting with a couple of them next week. They are now pushing for North Carolina. So I no longer wait for the feds to do something. I want to see local and state action. Even if we don't get hit by 100,000 volts, do you know that we've had something like, I think it's at least a score of solar eruptions just in the last week and a half? Yeah, it was at R2 last night. we're almost at the peak of the solar cycle. By the way, if you're willing to get up at dawn and get on top of a mountain tomorrow, you can see a partial eclipse of the sun, which would be really cool right at sunrise. So we have the CME issue as well that we have to be concerned about. A lot of this conference was also talking about cyber attack. Remember, Russia went to war with Georgia, not because they wanted Atlanta. It was about oil route lines, the other Georgia. And what was their pre-move? They cut loose teams of hackers to get inside the Georgia internet system, and they blew out a fair part of the Georgian internet and infrastructure control and command and control, a blinding first strike done by a bunch of hackers in a basement. We are highly vulnerable to infrastructure attack from cyber. I just saw an accusation leveled by the Russians that the Chinese somehow have put microchips inside some tea kettles that were being sold in Russia that transmit onto your Wi-Fi system and put malware into it. So those of you who are buying Chinese tea kettles at Walmart, look very carefully, please. So all the threats are out there, but we're still here. Everything's going fine today. I still have my health care plan through my school. I mean, we can't curl up into a ball and go hide, but we should be prepared. That's why I love getting with a group like this, because as you spread the word to others, maybe someday as citizens we'll all wake up and we'll demand some real action. Now I want to open this up to oh, by the way, some folks have asked me, yes, I did finally sign a contract to do a sequel to 1 Second After, and I'm starting to work on it right now. I'll be hitting some of you for advice later. And I do have another book. After 1 Second After came out, and I'm talking about this subject every day for weeks, months on end, and radio and all that sort of stuff, which I never expected, I really started getting depressed. And so my young daughter really started getting on my case. I mean, it's just my daughter and I living alone, and she's like, Daddy, your depression's getting to you again. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to come out of the basement. No, I want to sit here surrounded by cans of food I got from Carolina Preparedness. And so the family joke became that my next book was going to be called Happy Bunny Goes to Town. So I just finished writing it. I got a really cool offer from NASA a couple years ago to write about the future of the space program in a positive way. So yeah, I'm going to hold it up. The book comes out in February. It's called Pillar to the Sky, and it will shock you. The casualty rate in this book, I think, is 0.0001% of the casualty rate in 1 Second After. And there's even happy moments in it. So, and it was great fun working with NASA and learning a lot of their stuff. I'll ask one favor. If you haven't done so, take a couple minutes to review 1 Second After on Amazon for me, if you haven't already, because it gives me leverage with my publisher if the reviews go over 2,000. So I can point out and say, hey, look, no, actually my publisher's a great guy to work with. In fact, review all the books that you get here today. That's very important for authors. They see the reviews, and it influences other people buying. Let's open this up to questions and discussion and all that. Otherwise, I'll just ramble on about stuff, get depressed or whatever. So if you got a question, just stand up or put your hand up, or because I got glare in my eyes, maybe you should stand. Yeah, okay. Sorry. And I'll repeat the question as well. Oh, do we have a mic here? Oh, okay. Cool. God, it's warm under these lights.
Pretty loud guy. I probably don't need it.
Oh, they'll need it for the recording, though. But if you want to shout it out, and I'll repeat it.
Okay. I build bunkers for people.
Oh, okay.
So will a certain amount of earth and concrete and nesting help us to protect our electronics from the newest type of weapons? I mean, is there
It's a good
any
question.
protection?
This gentleman builds bunkers. What size bunkers?
I'm currently working on a 8x40. It's a 9.6 high cube. Mm-hmm. You know, it's got bunks, kitchen, bathroom, full bathroom, storage. can be solar powered, whatever you want,
Fascinating.
we can do it.
Gentleman sells bunkers. Question was securing against a very high level EMP laydown as long as you've properly Faraday caged it.
Right.
The entire
nest
structure.
your stuff, put, how far would a certain amount of earth is going to add to that, right? Correct. And concrete.
I couldn't tell you how many feet of earth would protect. Remember that we're a giant magnet. This planet's a giant magnet, and that electrical field is being drawn down into the iron core of the earth. So earth doesn't matter. When the Soviets blew out part of Kazakhstan with their test 184, it was buried electrical cables
Yeah, 600 miles.
where 600 miles of them just blew and burned. So I would say a heavy Faraday cage, your entire system, which will divert, and then it just continues on its way.
Okay.
So if anybody needs a bunker, what's your name, sir, and your company?
Michael, WNC Supply.
WNC Supply, Michael. He's the guy to talk to. Come on, a couple more questions? Sir? You could, yeah.
The current events, I mean, we're expecting
Current events. I was in Washington the day of the shutdown. So.
ostensibly an Israeli weapon, according if you believe the papers, within months. Israelis are in a tight spot. And with regard to EMPs being an effective offensive weapon, you think, considering their lack of force protection, that they couldn't actually sustain an effective air-to-ground campaign, would a EMP attack be something that we could potentially see
Against Israel. Yeah.
against Iran?
Against Iran, yeah, very good question. The gentleman's question was EMP usage in the Middle East, Israel, Iran, and I actually did an interview on Israeli national radio last year on that precise topic. And I talked with some experts before I got on, and about 3 days before I went on, a friend of mine who had been in the Pentagon but was in a different position freaked on me a bit. He said, Bill, remember, given your political association, the Iranians are going to be listening to Israeli national radio, and so be careful what you say. Keep emphasizing it's your opinion alone, and then if you want, put out your address and phone number so they can declare a fatwa against you. And have you ever seen that woman on YouTube who taunts them, come and get me, here's my address? Oh, she is so cool. She's still alive, too. It's assumed, it is absolutely assumed that an opening move in a full-scale confrontation between Israel and Iran, triggered over Syria, triggered in any number of different ways, that we have to factor EMP into the equation. That the Israelis would consider it as a decapitation strike against the Iranians, who would be somewhat more vulnerable to its impact, or that a weapon detonated about 30 to 50 miles up and out, a bit over the Med, would be used to strike Israel. And in that conversation, I was like, yeah, in Egypt, Turkey, and all that, the response was, whoever's attacking Israel wouldn't give a dang. Though he didn't quite phrase it that way. So, I was just reading last night, in fact, I was watching a very bad movie yesterday, starring Orson Welles as a Mongol, and which is very strange. And even he was actually talking about transitions in technology and warfare. This 13th century Mongol played by Orson Welles, and he points out that the side that loses a war automatically, when it's thinking the next one, will seek a technology, a new kind of weapon that will trump their opponent and how they were defeated the last time around. That puts EMP squarely on the table as a battlefield use, an operational use, or an overall continental-wide strike by an opponent. Because it would be a shocking Pearl Harbor. The conference I was at last month in DC, there was an expert there on warfare in space. and pointed out that first strike is to wipe out the command and control system of satellites. How many of you seen Galaxy, by the way? Gravity. I loved it. I'm not giving anything away, but I love George Clooney's line just before everything starts going bad, in which he says, "There goes Facebook for half the world," which was true. So imagine if the total panic on the part of every one of the students at my college if they can't text their boyfriends in the middle of class, or the kids sitting across the room. And I mean, come on, if you teach college, as soon as class is out, everybody steps outside, what do? You notice I have an old-fashioned one that doesn't work at all. We are so used to all of this, you decapitate it for even a day, and you have panic, be it cyber, EMP, or whatever. You'd have pure panic. We have become so dependent on instantaneous communication. An example I give is, imagine if on 9/11, we saw the first 30 minutes of that scenario playing out, and then everything shut down. What would have been the reaction then? Yes, exactly. It would be, it's happening everywhere. My God, it's happening. There would have been mass panic within minutes after it shut down. So to go back to your point, I fully assume if Iran and Israel ever go full out at it, EMP will be one of the components. Yes?
In the scenario you talked about with the enhanced devices, how many devices would you imagine would be used, and how many would be required to take out our entire grid?
Okay, the question was enhanced device, how many would be used against us, how many would be needed to take out the entire grid? The assumption I've seen, starting with the congressional report of 2004, a detonation of one weapon 250 miles up over Kansas, it's a line of sight event that would strike both horizons. However, its intensity decreases the further out you go. The perfect storm that people talk about is 3 against the United States. One in the eastern United States over Ohio, another one over Kansas, another one over Utah, Nevada. That would do a laydown across the entire country. Launch vehicles, the launch system could be a cargo container ship in the Gulf of Mexico. Recall a couple years ago, the Russians lost a cargo container ship for 2 weeks. Nobody knew where it was. What percentage of container ships are even fully inspected? None of them are tracked. The defense system we currently have in place is only on the West Coast, oriented towards preventing a strike from China or North Korea by the standard ICBM. We have 0 defense line along the Gulf of Mexico and up the Atlantic coast. 0 warning time. Even if we did have a detection system available of, oh my God, we're seeing a launch in the Gulf of Mexico, so they get on their computer and it's like, apply here. Please wait, the system is overloaded, and you're counting down the seconds to the end. I don't mean to be facetious, but even if we did have a detection system, being able to intercept it would be almost impossible. The only thing that can stop it, an incredibly robust foreign policy that does not crawl to our enemies, but instead makes it clear, you even remotely think about doing this, we find in any way whatsoever that you're planning to do this, we assure you, you will cease to exist before you do it. That is the only thing that will stop it.
Yes, back here.
Campaign.
Yes, sir, back here.
Yes, sir.
The Boston Marathon bombing fiasco, do you think that was a test run? They shut the city down in a matter of hours with police and military.
The Boston Marathon, was it a test run for these? Oh yeah, all of these scenarios show absolute infrastructure shutdown, panic. I mean, look what happened at LAX yesterday. I mean, a horrific scenario. A gunman goes in, and suddenly the whole transportation grid going out of Los Angeles is pretty well offline for about half a day, echoing across the entire country. Boston, I mean, how many people do they finally have deployed? Over 10,000? And the perimeter they set up, the guy was hiding outside the perimeter. Now, I'm not faulting whatsoever the brave men and women who are out facing a lunatic killer. But our behavior consistently reinforces to our opponents just how vulnerable we are. That we act in panic, or we screw it up, or we crawl and bow, and it's just a constant. That's what scares me right now, is we are reinforcing the opponents who want to see us taken down. That they can do it and they can get away with it. Look at our foreign policy in the 2 years prior to World War II. If only I, as a historian, could time travel back somehow, like a Twilight Zone episode, and go to the leaders of Japan and Germany and say, I'm going to show you a photograph of what your capital cities will look like in 1945 if you continue to screw with us. There will be nothing left. Now, do you still want to try it? No, they thought they were going to win. Opponents facing us now feel the same way, that they can take us out and they can win. I dread to think of the day we do really lose and never come back. Do you see why I had to write a book called Happy Bunny Goes to Town? I almost said a bad word. Turn the mic off. Sir.
Back to the Middle East, when we started our conflict with Iraq, we sent in stealth fighters, conventional bombs. We were hoping we wouldn't lose people to take out their infrastructure. Did we consider an EMP at that point?
Did we consider an EMP? I've been told, declassified. Notice how I keep saying that? Because I know somebody up there is listening. I saw an article where, do you know your toilet might be listening? There are now electronic chips that somebody's marketing a toilet that you can, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, it's like, oh, wow, and you could just say toilet warm up and the seat warms up for you. Well, if the toilet has a microphone receiver in there, it can also hear you, which I don't want to think about. But that can be hacked. That can be hacked. So I know somebody's going to watch this thing. What the heck was the question again? I'm losing my brain.
Potential EMP attack instead of conventional bombing.
Iraq, yes. Okay. I was told that in 1991, remember there was a lot of concern that Saddam was going to unleash chemical weapons. And I was told that the message was conveyed, you use chemical weapons, we'll detonate a nuke about 30, 40 miles high above Baghdad, and we'll blow out your whole infrastructure across the entire country. Think about it. We're going in on a limited objective, which is to kick your butt out of Kuwait. I do wish we had pushed it for another 100 hours. We wouldn't have to have gone back in 2003. But that threat, I'm told, was real. That we would be willing to go that level if they unleashed chemical weapons. I assume the threat was there again in 2003. I mean, where did Syria get its chemical weapons? The ones we couldn't find. We got somebody.
Thank you for signing my book. Here's what scares me. We all know about Japan and those 4 nuclear reactors that are contaminating the globe. My question is to you, and my fears, is how long do you think, if there was an EMP attack in this country, that our nuclear power stations, I know they got backup generators, how long do you think that'll last? And we can't expect what we got going on in Japan happening right here in this country.
Question is, in consideration of what happened to Japan with its nuclear power plants, what about our power plants here? The vulnerable part of the infrastructure is not actually the generating systems themselves. Let's say there's security systems inside some of our nuke plants to be able to withstand potential threats. It's all those hundreds of thousands of miles of high transmission lines. That's what goes. I recall being at an Impact America conference several years back where one of the experts on this showed us one of those, oh my God, high-speed videos, showing what happens to a high tension line at an overload, I think it was 1,000 volts per square meter.